Adolescence, the series that's on Netflix at the moment. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this episode, people, because I can see by looking on social media that it's a very popular program. Now, I think there was only a handful of episodes, I can't even remember exactly, only just watched it about a week ago. But if you haven't watched it, go and give it a watch. Brilliant actor Stephen Graham. And it's about his son who was arrested and sent to prison for murder. Now, his son is only 13-year-old, and it's a very touching topic, kids who kill. And it shows you the impact, not only from, it's not from the victim's point of view, even though the parents are now victims of the crime what their son committed, because they've now got to suffer the consequences. Now, for kids and teens who kill, it is more common than what you think, especially in deprived areas. And this is what I try and teach the youngsters in my area. This is what I try and talk about, and try and deter them from going down that route. Because being a youngster living in these type of areas, I still live in the same neighbourhood or the same area, town, what I have done since I was 5-year-old. And the town I live in, Stanley, it's nothing like the cities, as in the likes of London, Birmingham, even Newcastle. They're totally different. But even living in these towns where I live, in County Durham, these little rough mining villages and towns, it's exactly the same as in the areas of that deprived and that rough. The kids, a lot of the kids, I'm not saying all of them, a lot of the kids on the council estates have got nothing to do. They've got no role models. They've got no father figures there. They've got no one to teach them right from wrong. Everyone needs an older male role model. But the youngsters, the young lads do anyway. Obviously the lasses look up to the mothers, lads look up to the dads. And if we don't get a grasp on this and start helping out in our own local areas, then that situation is just going to spiral and get worse and worse, as it has over the years. But in that documentary, Adolescence, when they come and raid his house, early hours in the morning, they've come in, raided his house, looking for his son. The mother's in, so the mother, the father, and the sister, coppers of bread in, smashed the door in, went in the house, looking for the youngster, dragged him out of bed. And for anyone who's never been in trouble before watching this, is thinking this is quite harsh, this is quite brutal, but this is what happens when you're involved in things like that. It brought back memories for myself when I was living with my ma. And the coppers kept coming to the house looking for me when I was involved in a few violent things in my teenage years myself. And the coppers came looking for weapons. They searched the house, took me away. My sister was 15-year-old and pregnant, crying her eyes out, blaring when our little brother was getting took away. So that brought memories back for me. I was thinking, fucking hell. And then you don't realise the impact that you're having on your family members when you're out committing crimes, doing whatever, roaming the streets, getting up to no good. Your parents, your siblings are back home, suffering when the coppers are looking for you, shitting themselves because they love you that much. But again, when you're that young and you haven't got role models and you don't give a fuck, so to speak, then that's what happens. You're out there doing whatever, not giving anybody else a second thought, and then these type of offences occur. I mean, in that in that series, Adolescence, it was a young teenage girl that was murdered. But it was quite, at the end of the series, I'm sure there's got to be a second series, because the way, in that documentary, or the series, sorry, at the end, when it finished, I'll not tell you exactly what happened because there'll be people that hasn't seen it yet, go and watch it. But at the end, the way that it finished, it was a bit, the way it finished I thought was a bit shit, to be honest. I thought you were going to see the court case and see the sentencing and see what happened afterwards. So I'd imagine there's going to be a part 2 when he's in prison. Because there was parts of it when I thought, has he actually done it? And was it his friend? And was he just keeping quiet and covering up for his friend? So obviously at the end, the way that it finished, it left you with some unanswered questions. So we'll wait and see if there's going to be a part 2. But I just thought I would talk a little bit about that, but talk a little bit more so about teens or kids who kill and why they do it. I mean, I've done a video on one a few days ago. Nicholas Prosper, who had ASD, some form of autism, I believe it is, and he killed his entire family in the house in the most horrific way. His mother, brother, and sister. Now, he had a deluded and warped sense of, well, you can't really describe it other than fucked up. He had a warped sense of fucked upness, if that's even a word. But what I'm getting at with him, that's totally different to the type of kids I'm talking about who are out on the streets roaming around with knives, more so in the cities when they're running around with guns. Because when I was in Franklin prison, I was in there with quite a few lads my age. I was 21 at the time. I was one of the youngest there, but there was a few lads, 22, 23, from down Liverpool, Manchester way, Birmingham, all doing life sentences for murder. Obviously shooting people dead on the streets and getting life with a minimum of 25, 30, 35 years. That's their life wasted. But again, they're out on the streets, they've got no role models, they've got no sense of direction. They're just going with the flow, going with what they think is normal or normality in their local area. The older lads are doing it. You're a youngster looking up to it, you end up doing it. Sometimes the youngsters are getting groomed off the older lads or the older gang members in these type of cases. And then they're going out, committing murders, taking out hits without a second thought. But when you're a youngster, teenage years, young lad, full of bravado, not giving a fuck, not got a sense of direction, surrounded by people that have been to prison, you want to make your mark, you want to go to prison, you're not really bothered about the consequences. It's not until you're sitting in there, sitting in a high security prison, with a 30-year recommendation up your arse, when you're sitting there thinking, what the actual fuck, excuse the language, people, but it's the only way I can find it fitting to put it. So these lads that I was sharing a wing with, I was doing IPP with a minimum of 4 years. Mine was a baby sentence. Even though to me it was a big sentence, that was a baby sentence compared to some of them sitting in there with 30-year recs. There was a young lad I was in with, Scouser, Lloydie. He was doing an IPP. Didn't give a fuck. He was in prison. I can't remember which jail it was, what he was in. And then someone got shot dead outside the prison after a visit. Lloydie was obviously convicted on murder. And I believe he got a minimum of 25 years, something around like that. And he was 21-year-old at the time. But again, youngsters like that at that age, no sense of direction, no thought about consequences. But you could tell obviously when he's sitting there sharing a wing with us in Franklin prison, you could tell he must have thought to himself, what the fuck have I done with my life? Young teenage lad, now sitting in a high security jail, not going to be up for parole until you're into your 50s. Obviously in his case in his 40s, but there was lads I was in there with, 23, 24-year-old, with 35-year tariffs. So they're not going to be up for parole until they're in the late 50s. That's their life done. And that's youngsters, teens who kill. Going out without a second thought, no consequences, more times than not, full of drink, full of drugs, and just not asked, wanting that name, wanting that reputation. And I'm speaking from experience here myself because I was the same. Wanting that name, wanting that reputation, wanting to go to prison, believe it or not. A lot of people, when they watched that HMP frightening documentary that I was in, when I've spoke with them afterwards, they were saying, did you actually want to go to prison from a young age? But I did. From the age of 7, 8, 9-year-old, I wanted to go to prison. So imagine youngsters, people, like I've just mentioned, people who have never been to prison or never been involved in the criminal fraternity or anything like that. They've come from a good family, from a good estate, not much crime in their area. They won't be able to understand how a youngster at that age would want to go to prison. They'd be like questioning and thinking, is he talking seriously or is he talking shit? Is this real? It is real, and this is what's happening in these neighborhoods, in these cities, these ghettos. People or youngsters are wanting to go to prison to get that badge of honor because it's looked upon in these areas as a badge of honor. You've been to prison, you're the tough guy, you handled your jail, you've done whatever in jail, you've come out, you've got that reputation, you've used violence in the past, and then obviously you've got that fearsome reputation not to be messed with. But some instances, like I've mentioned, when they've went too far and they've committed murder, then there is no coming out with your reputation. Your reputation is fucking done as far as the streets are concerned because you're not back out there for another 30 years. So all that you wanted from a young age is gone. And your reputation doesn't mean jack shit in prison. When you're in jail in a category of high security prison, surrounded by hundreds of gangsters, hitmen, murderers from all over the country, your reputation from the street going in there doesn't mean nothing. You've got to build another reputation inside of prison, which is harder and more concerning than the reputation from on the streets. Because you get your reputation in prison and you want to act that same big man, then you're going to become unstuck. I've seen some big time gangsters in prison come in who have been in documentaries. They've been spoke about many a times over the years. They've got a notorious name, notorious gangsters. They go into prison and they're just the same ordinary Joe Blogs, same as everybody else in there. In there, your reputation's gone. You've got to build your reputation inside a prison. Obviously, people will know you, and that reputation does go somewhere. But if you go in there and you meet people from other cities, and you go on as if you've still got that big reputation, and these other big gangsters from the other cities think, well, who the fuck are you? Then it's on. Then it's a whole different ball game. People don't think about those consequences when they're younger. The youngsters on the streets don't think about that. You don't think, fuck, what am I going to do when I get into a high security prison? And I've got to defend myself in there. I haven't got me weapons no more. But I can't fight. Obviously you can get weapons inside a prison, but go down that route and your life will become a living hell inside of prison, watching over your back, people taking out hits on you. People don't think about that. These young adolescents on the street don't think about these sort of consequences when they're out there committing crimes. So that's why I wanted to talk about that program. And I'll start talking about the parent now, obviously from that parent's point of view. Imagine, well, you wouldn't want to imagine it, but imagine that parent. I know that was just a series, but imagine in these cases where your house has been raided looking for your son. I've got 3 sons myself now and a daughter, but me 3 sons, 13, 9 and 8, 7, 13, 9 and 7. So imagine coppers have raided your house, take your 13-year-old son away on a murder charge. That young lad swore down and promised to his dad as well when he's breaking down. They were crying in the interview room. And he says, look, son, tell us, did you do it? And he says, no, Dad, I didn't. I promise you, I promise you. But then obviously it turned out he did. And that, in real life situation, must be the most heartbreaking thing ever as a parent. Feeling like you've failed your kid. Your kid is now going to spend the rest of his life, or the big proportion of his life, in prison. I mean, youngsters at that age don't get tariffs as big as adults. But even a 10-year, 12-year tariff, a recommendation before you're up for release at that age, taken away from your parents and put into a secure training centre, or whatever they call them, into the young offender prisons when they're 15 to 18, I think it is. That must be the most heartbreaking thing ever. Especially someone who's a good parent, because he looked like he came from a good family, and feel like you failed. Well, you have failed as a parent. Your kid has went to prison. That's why I try my best with my kids now. I've got my kids into sport. I make sure they're busy. Try and keep them off the streets. My daughter's got a horse. She's there all the time in her spare time. My other kids are into boxing and MMA. Keeping them busy, keeping them off the streets. So you can only try to be the best, but you've got to try to be the best, because if you don't, and your kids go down that route, then you've got no one to blame but yourself. But there is kids growing up without parents, growing up without role models, and it is sad to see. And that's why I try to give kids as much time as possible and help out where I can. I've got all sorts on in my gym for kids. Got the boxing. Kids are allowed to come in and train with the mates as long as they're over 13. You can come in at any age with an adult in my gym. And I think gyms are the best place to get kids at a young age. It teaches them discipline. It gives them something to do. It tires them out. And if they enjoy it and they can see potential, it gives them a focus. Focus on training, focus on the gym, instead of focusing on bottles of cider, bongs, spliffs, pipes, buckets, lungs, all them type of things like you do when you're a kid, when you live in these type of areas. It's just the norm to go out with your pals and get wrecked on a weekend. It starts off, like I've just mentioned, with cider, then you're onto the weed, then the more harder drugs come involved when you get older, and that's when things spiral out of control, especially when tablets and things that get involved, Valium, stuff like that. Because when you get kids who are already, like I've mentioned, in that mindset, already violent, and then they start mixing all these other fucking substances in, then the real trouble begins. And once you go down that route, there's no coming back until you go to prison and you change your mindset, like I did myself. I was sentenced to IPP, which is a life sentence, same as a life sentence, with a minimum tariff, and it is a 99-year sentence. There's lads sitting inside now who I've just mentioned. 17-year-old lad, for instance, who robbed a bike off another kid. He was given IPP with a minimum of 18 months in prison. 17-year-old. He's 36-year-old now, and he's still in prison. And a lot of people haven't heard about these indeterminate sentences, what got abolished in 2012 because they were deemed inhumane. Now these sentences, the ones that got them were stuck with them. Same as myself. I done my offence when I was 20, got the IPP when I turned 21, 4-year minimum recommendation. I spent just over 5 years in. Stayed out for nearly 10 years, got recalled, spent another 14 months in, was back out for 4 years, and had my IPP terminated, because it can be removed if you've spent a certain amount of time out in the community without any trouble, and the parole board say that you don't need it any longer. But I've only just had that terminated, and I'm now 40. So half of my life wasted on that sentence where I couldn't go abroad. I spent nearly 7 years in prison. So that is what happened with me, but that changed my mindset, turned my life around, and that's why I'm on here doing these videos. I know a lot of the other videos are different topics, talking about the beatings inside a prison, but there is other topics that I cover on here, and the more so the educational ones like this, to try and reach out to the kids. because I have been inside of a school doing a talk, or talks rather, with the kids, talking about fitness, mental health in prison, trying to change the mindsets. Because this school that I went into, the kids are being kicked out of mainstream school, and they were at risk, some of them were at risk of going to prison. So I went in, done talks with them, trying to help change their mindset and let them see what actually happens when you go in prison, because they're only hearing from their friends and seeing TikTok videos about bouncing about the wings, partying on, thinking it's clever, thinking that's not a deterrent. You go in there, you can make money, you can make pals, you're going to be loaded when you come out. But they don't hear the horror stories and what really goes on inside of prison. They just see these videos, people bouncing about the pads with mobile phones, thinking it's an absolute holiday camp, when it's the absolute opposite. If you want better in life and you're stuck in that shithole, you're in for a rough ride. So that's what I've been talking about as well, trying to get the kids to see the other side of the story, the other side of what happens inside of prison. So people, I thought I would just do a bit of a breakdown there, a bit of a different video, a bit of a more of an educational, purposeful talk. I know these videos don't get as much views, but the ones that do watch them take a lot away from them. But I will leave that one there for now, people. And if there is any more of these type of videos you want to see, just drop it in the comment section. And if you are still watching up till now, remember to comment, like, and subscribe. But this video will be getting uploaded without any edits. It's easier doing that way, and there is no need to do an edit when these type of videos is just freestyle, coming up, talking sense about adolescence. Anyways, people, I'm going to leave that one there for now. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.